So easy though.
Okay, it is 3 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And if anybody does want to address the board, there's sheets in the back to sign up and you hand to this gentleman here with the time.
Just for a second.
So if you'll please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You know how long the adjournment is?
Today's meeting is going to begin with a board workshop on pond standards and littoral plans. And after this, I'll turn it over to you, Scott.
You can take some time.
Just going to speak from here, try to be a little more clear and loud so people can hear. And I know in some of the past meetings, we've had issues with that. One of the things on the agenda is we're getting a new sound system. So instead of recording and projecting from there, we'll have speakers around the room, and it'll make it a lot easier for everybody to hear what's going on with the board members.
Chris, let me do one business item, and that was I didn't call the roll. So I just want to point out that we have our district attorney, Tony Pierce, here, Supervisor Tinkle, Supervisor Banks, Supervisor Feinberg, Supervisor Guy, Supervisor Flaherty, and our district manager, Chris Shoemaker. Thank you.
I just had a few remarks to open up the workshop today and make reference to some of the things that have been going on the past few months. We basically got this project underway, this discussion on pond standards and littoral workshops in January, and we had representatives from the County Development Department and Pond Watch come in and talk about regulation and policies and littorals throughout Lee County. And it was a very good workshop, and one of the things that came up is there was some requests about trimming or removing littorals, and there was an old draft policy the board had considered, but it was never adopted or included in any of these pond standards. And at that time, it became an issue, well, can a resident request removal of littorals? Does an HOA request removal of littorals? Does the board make the direction? And that came up for discussion. And it stopped at that workshop, and then we went in as staff and had a couple more workshops with some of the residents and the board members at the Hampton Park HOA to get a little more into the details of the littorals in the workshops. And last Friday, district staff went in with also district council and met with representatives from the county, from the development department, the county attorney's office, code enforcement. There were several residents from Hampton Park there and also representatives from the HOA at that meeting.
Could you talk louder? We can't hear you. It's like, I don't know, is there a loudspeaker over here?
No.
No? No?
I'll try to speak
Are you
into this and
using
see if it
anything?
helps.
It's a lot better when you're closer to the mic.
Okay, so last Friday, we met with county staff, and Tony Pierce and Elle and myself went over there, and the county staff was there from several departments, including the county attorney's office, representatives from Hampton Park, representatives from the Hampton HOA. And the county basically went on to do a presentation about littoral regulation, littoral policy, and how they view littorals from their standpoint on regulation. And when I'm done with my remarks here in a minute, I'll let Tony expound on that a little bit about what went on with the meeting. But basically, they were saying the county regulates the number of littorals by the development order, and typically the minimum of that is 25% coverage of a shoreline, but there is no maximum. And some of those development orders do regulate the width of those littorals, anywhere from 8 to 10 feet, 14 to 16 feet. It varies by lake. But the bottom line is the county staff said the Gateway CDD is the owner, the operator, and the permittee of the ponds, and can operate and maintain the ponds however the CDD decides to do that. There's few comments started coming from the residents, and the county staff basically held their hand up and said, we're done talking, we explained the framework to you if you want to have a discussion among yourselves, and they got up and walked out. But they were basically presenting what the bottom line was to them. From a staff perspective, working day in and day out, we can offer the following comments. That the ponds are a stormwater treatment and conveyance system. They're for stormwater. They are not recreational lakes. They are not fishing lakes. They don't exist for aesthetic purposes. They are a stormwater treatment and conveyance system for that. And that littorals, from our perspective, are good for water quality, wildlife habitat, and help prevent shoreline erosion. Today's an open discussion on the pond standards and policies for the board to consider and take some public input, and we assume they'll provide some direction, and we'll come back at a later date to take formal action. But there is no voting today. They are not approving anything. It's really an open discussion forum, and we typically do this for about an hour and then move into the regular meeting. And with that, Tony, do you have any comments on the meeting?
Yeah, what I prepared was a rough summary outline of the minutes of the meeting, from my notes, my recollection. I took handwritten notes during the course of the meeting. And some of it Chris has already summarized. And you can see all the people that attended. I thought it was a good, productive meeting with the county staff. And the primary issue was Jessica Sulzer basically led the conversation, county staff, and she outlined the reasons for the littoral planting, intended for water quality and erosion control. Lee County regulates the size of lakes, what the lake looks like, slopes, minimum littoral amounts and locations, and if you have a deep lake, aerators in deep lakes. And Lee County, mentioned by Jessica, requires or outlines the minimums. And if you go above and beyond the minimums, and are meeting minimum requirements, it's acceptable to Lee County. The littorals help to maintain required slope, that's why they're part of the process. And natural spreading will occur, and it's up to the operating entity, as Chris mentioned. In this case, the district has the district-owned or operated lakes, to maintain the lakes and littorals and aerators however deemed fit to meet Lee County minimum standards for the Lee County Land Development Code, as well as South Florida Water Management District requirements. And she said that Gateway, if the operating entity, can remove littorals above and beyond the required minimum if, one, the required slopes are maintained, two, water quality is maintained, and three, you maintain the Lee County Land Development Code required amount of littorals. And Mr. Brandon asked a question about whether or not applications could be submitted for a limited development order to, for above and beyond, we'll call it littoral planting. That would have to be submitted by the operating entity or owner. Jessica said yes, that can be submitted and approved and be binding on the owner or operator. They can apply for above and beyond littoral planting. And she gave an example. She said Miramar Lakes, I believe, was an example of having above and beyond. I didn't ask her at the time, and I'm not sure if we have a response back yet. The question was if an amended development order was applied for to do above and beyond plantings, whether or not a further modification could be submitted in the future to reduce the littoral plantings back to the code required levels. And Chris, I don't know if you have an answer back yet on that?
I have not gotten an answer back. I followed up today.
Okay. And that's pretty much a summation of the meeting. Chris summed it up pretty well. It's just an additional summation. It was a good meeting. It was positive from the standpoint of the staff of the county soliciting the input.
Any reason our engineer and a flight vendor didn't attend the meeting?
They weren't invited.
I think it would have been a good idea to have them there. They're the professionals. We had all rookies at the meeting. The other one is, I'd asked, and I haven't seen it passed out. Does everybody have a copy of 10-418? Because what Tony read and what they said is what they've said before. That's not their standards. It doesn't say the word minimum anywhere in their standards.
Does anybody need a copy?
I'd ask for all the board members to have a copy.
You got an
of
extra copy?
10-418.
I do.
I think we'll make a mountain out of a royal molehill, this whole deal. That original document was put together 4 years ago by a lot of people, a lot of professionals and staff. And the only thing that I could see that would improve on it would be possibly a discussion that would replace the attempted addendum to it that would discuss the method of property owners and/or HOAs or POAs to request excessive beyond the development order of littorals. Other than that, I'm as written, and I don't know who authored this, but they certainly did not know anything about the 10418 code. I'm going to vote no on everything in here.
Say that last part again?
I said I'm voting no on everything in here as written. It's poorly written, very poorly written. Should have been written by a professional.
It's a document for discussion of issues. It's not anything we're voting on today. I think the board would vote on today. It's just a workshop to discuss these concepts and ideas.
It is so bad, Chris, it doesn't even follow the county standards. It doesn't follow the county standards. Now, if we want to have a workshop to talk about LDOs, we can go ahead and talk about LDOs, but my idea was if you want to have an LDO on a lake, then go to the property owner association or the homeowners association of that community and have a majority of vote of the people. And if they want to do an LDO and change it to larger standards, greater standards, be my guest, but I want to see a majority of the vote saying that. And then the other one is they're going to have to consent to pay for it out of their own pocket, because I'm not voting to have the rest of the residents pay for a luxury that somebody else wants.
I understand that you don't like any of the changes. It was actually myself and Al that worked on this, and we went page by page and talked about the different things and what made sense and what didn't. The one thing that I think the district needed to do was make this a document that we could actually enforce. And the county and their experts and professionals have told us over and over again, including in this meeting room, that the minimum, the 25% is minimum.
That's
And
still doable.
I asked the question, is there a maximum? And they stated no in this very room.
Have them put that in writing.
It's in.
I asked for it in writing, and they will not give it to you, because they've got standards, and you know what's gonna happen if they do that? They're gonna turn around and have to redo this standard and have all these ponds, all these developers, and everybody putting these in, and you know what's gonna be screaming next? All the residents, my rates just went up by $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 because we're having to maintain these things. They will not put it in writing. They're good bureaucrats down there.
All I can say is they keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And the most significant change in here is the addition of the littoral removal request. And that is all underlined because that's all new to this document.
The other one that I have a problem with is that this was a pond standard for Gateway. Now all of a sudden it's a pond standard for Gateway West Pelican Reserve. What happened?
Where you put your phone on vibrate.
I'll pay you $5.
It's Trump calling. It's, what happened? I thought we were one district. They were included in the
Al,
other
will you
document. What
address
happened?
We are one district, but it is a mutual understanding that Pelican Reserve oversees and they maintain their ponds through their own contract. They were not ever, even when we did these the first time, they were not consulted to go in with these pond standards. They have their own set of pond standards as far as I understand.
We're
Mr. Gilbert
100%.
may correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Two things. I'd like to see a copy of their pond standards for comparison. And the second thing is who's responsible?
Gateway is
responsible for all
ultimately
this?
Gateway is ultimately responsible as
That's
a
my point.
permittee
It
for
needs to
all
be one
lakes and
standard for
wetlands.
both communities. This dividing this community up has got to come to an end. It's a standard is a standard.
The other thing is, all of the rest of Gateway is maintained through the 001 fund, and their ponds and their maintenance is
It doesn't make any
paid
difference,
for
Margaret.
through
It's
the
one
002.
community.
Yeah. Bob Davis.
Bob Geppert from Pelican Reserve, the Ponds Work Group, and we're the ones that oversee it. The only difference, Ed, in the standards is that in Pelican, we have 100% coverage. And as we understood it, nobody over here wanted that, and that's why we're doing it.
Yeah,
Could I get a copy of the standard?
I just told you, that's all there is. I just gave you the verbal standard. We're 100%.
We don't have a written standard over there.
We have the one we do. And then we just, with that one exception.
So you adopted on your own, which I said earlier.
No,
I have
no,
problem.
no, go back to 2016. We were part of that.
No, I'm
Not
not
the
saying that.
revision.
I said you've elected, your community has elected to go to that higher level.
Yeah.
I have no problem, I said that earlier. Somebody
And to
wants to
fund.
do an LDO here and go to a higher standard,
And to take
go through the LDO.
physical responsibility.
Right, and we pay for
And
it.
we pay for it.
We pay for it.
We put in $30,000, $40,000 worth a year in plans.
I
If
don't
there
have
was
I
another
have no
community that
problem
wanted to
with
take on that same financial responsibility,
Yeah.
then
I don't have a problem
But
with that.
since
One-
there,
one of the
let me
aspects-
just make a comment that since there's no maximum, if a community wants to do 100%, I don't know why you'd have to do an LDO. Because if that's what they want to do, there is no maximum requirement. It doesn't say it has to be 25 to 75. It says 25 is a minimum, and there is no maximum.
But the problem is,
According to the county there, you
don't
have to do an LDO.
No, you don't. The county said you can if you want to, you don't have to. The question was asked by Mr. Brand, what if someone wanted to? And that was her answer. But there's no obligation or requirement to have an LDO to go do it above and beyond.
That's what Aaron told me. You had to do an LDO if you're going up, because there was a previous development order which people bought based on, and it impacts those people, they have to be able to do it.
Okay, all I'm saying is, that's what Jessica made very clear to me.
What's the pecking order over there?
Right.
It's my understanding Aaron was at the top.
Jessica made it very clear. that-
I mean, I'm not saying that.
No, I
I
understand.
want to talk to the person at the top. I don't want to talk to somebody at a lower level. It's that simple.
And I guess secondly, I think what's important also, I don't know what the city's standards are, and whether or not they would apply the same sort of criteria, the above and beyond aspect, because recall, Pelican Reserve is in the city, they may be different standards in the
And they're
city.
immensely different. Go over to Arborwood on West Links Drive and Gateway, you can look at 20 ponds, and there isn't one single littoral in 20 ponds. Not one. So you watch what people, they say things that they really sometimes don't mean.
Chris, I think,
That's what I
there,
feel.
we did have a couple residents that had signed up to speak. Mr. Brand was one of them.
Because I think we talked about 6.
Okay.
Mr. Brand was first. We'd like to-
it's in their DO. But there's no
Except for the
requirement in their
pigs
DO.
have to wait, Jim.
Jiggly wiggly.
Did you get what this does?
yeah.
Huh? You did?
You gotta have something to laugh about in this serious discussion. Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, Board of Supervisors. I'm James Brand. Excuse me, I reside in Hampton Park. Today I want to discuss Hampton Park pigs and storm lakes. At the Board of Supervisors meeting a month ago, I brought up the issue of pigs in Hampton Park. Chris
Jim,
even.
can we save the pigs till after the workshop?
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, absolutely. So, I have a handout that I provided to the board after the pigs. And the first page of that handout is what I emailed to the board members, although this is a compressed document, and I also sent it to Chris. Unless you have questions about it, I don't see any need to discuss that first page. I sent the page 2 on the reverse side. At the top is Hampton Park Master Declaration excerpts. Each homeowner in closing on their home in Hampton Park is required by the title company to agree to abide by the terms of the Hampton Park HOA Declaration. The excerpts from the HOA Declaration indicate in so many words that no owner shall remove vegetation from the lake banks. Maintenance of such vegetation is the responsibility of the CDD. The Master Association has the power to assess fines for any violation of the provisions of the declaration, and it does, and it has. My understanding is that Supervisor Tinkle asserted in the last GSCDD Board of Supervisors meeting that he is in favor of the vegetation surrounding the Hampton Park storm lakes conforming to the 2004 DO. However, the cost to remove the vegetation, approximately 75% of the vegetation would have to be removed to conform to the 2004 DO far exceeds the funding available. Additionally, it's attested to by Mr. Andy Haygate, and that's also a document, a copy of the email that I sent, provided you copies of, correspondence between me and Mr. Haygate. And I asked him for permission to provide that email. He attested that, and he's a realtor and a resident of Hampton Park, he attested that home values increase significantly when the home backs to lakes, which are well maintained. I asked him in a conversation about values when the lake banks have been stripped of vegetation and or bare. He indicated without hesitation that home values will significantly decrease in that situation. Last Friday, May 10th, Lee County Community Development held a meeting. Tony has provided a great assessment of that, what was discussed. I asked Jessica Sulzer, the Development Service Manager, about her thoughts on the LDO or DO. Paraphrasing her comments, she stated that it would memorialize and perpetuate the status of the Hampton Park storm littorals. She also stated that littorals help prevent lake bank erosion and maintain water quality. I propose, and you all have a copy of this as well, a limited DO or a DO. I get different comments from the county. Is it LDO or a DO, whichever one's required. I was told yesterday that the current DO from 2004 is closed, so we require a brand new DO. It's Hampton Park storm lakes are part of the Gateway Stormwater Management System. It is a benefit to the whole system to minimize erosion and ensure water quality of Hampton Park storm lakes. The cost of creation and submitting a DO should be borne by the Gateway CDD, like what's being done for the rest of the Gateway Stormwater Management System. The information required to complete the form is readily available to the CDD staff, as are the appropriate forms to submit a request. Thank you.
Next, Patty Stevens, Kentwood Avenue.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Patty Stevens, and I live in Hampton Park at 12506 Kentwood Avenue. I am also a member of the Hampton Park Board of Directors and hold the position of Secretary. I am speaking to you today on behalf of our board and at the request of our president, Bob Stoll, who was unable to attend the meeting today. The Hampton Park Board understands that the GSCDD has control over the lakes in Hampton Park. We will be making a recommendation in a formal request that GSCDD maintain and properly trim the existing littorals and not allow bare lake banks. This request will be mailed to you by our board president, Bob Stoll, following our June board meetings. I want to also inform you that we have received many complaints from our homeowners regarding infestation of midges. We request that the lakes be treated for midges as soon as possible and that future treatment be included in your contract with Aquagenics. We hope as you work through your process that you will give serious consideration to the recommendations from Hampton Park. Thank you.
Flavia Walsh, Magnolia Lakes.
I almost thought I was at the wrong meeting, so. Good afternoon, everyone. Flavia Walsh, Magnolia Lakes. I actually wrote some feedback in regards to the pond standards, and contrary to pretty much everyone, I am into plant the littorals. So on the new draft, I noticed on page 6, that policy for the littoral removal request. It really only talks about removal, but it does not talk anything about replanting. So I think it would be good if we could incorporate the word replanting in there, because then we can use the same form and the same guideline for asking for a different item. Another thing that I think is really crucial, it appears that the Gateway District would like 100% compliance and 100% of the homeowners to agree to something. We cannot get the 5 of you to agree to things sometimes. So I think that's an unrealistic measurement to try to get 100% compliance from all residents to agree to something and then have the HOA formally come in and ask you guys to do it. Not only that, we do have ponds that border 2 different HOAs, like Pond 84. Half is Bristol Park, half is Magnolia. So would that mean that I would have to have every single resident of Bristol Park agree with an addition to all my 116 residents to do anything to that pond? So I think that we have to think a little bit more. Also, the question in regards to the development order, are we planning to just follow the development order only when it comes to littorals and planting, or everything else? And the reason why I will ask that is our development order says 1 aerator, 3 heads. Currently we have 7 heads. So what would that mean? Do I have to take the 4 heads out? Like, when do we follow, when we don't follow? When do we have a good enough excuse to allow things to be different? I think that would be increasing in there. Another one would be on the item 8, when it says this may take up to a month or more. I would just suggest they either put 2 months or not, but when you say up to something or more, kind of doesn't really make sense. What I heard a lot about it when Chris got here and everybody else is saying how important littorals are for the pond. They're important for the erosion, they're important for water quality, they're important for slope and everything else. Well, you guys know that I haven't been here very much every single month asking for the planting of the littorals for the last 3.5 years. To date, I have not seen 1 littoral be planted in Magnolia Lakes. So the question to me is, if the board or staff is aware that littorals are so important and they can, at the end, save money for the district by planting them and not letting erosion happen, slope issue happens, water quality happens, why are we not planting? You guys created the standards that currently are adopted. I followed those standards and what was required for me to do as a resident and as an HOA board member, to come here and ask for action to be taken. Last meeting, January 3rd, you guys gave direction and we had asked Chris, when would this project be done? And it was end of April. Well, to today, no planting has been done, nothing has started. So I do have to agree with Ed, and a lot of the things here, I don't think, almost like it don't make sense. But I just think that this document should be used for both removal and replanting of those littorals. That's all I have.
Do we have an update for her on when the littorals will be planted in Magnolia?
I do not. I don't recall saying about the totals, and then we were talking about doing it and waiting until some construction was done, but it's something we want to move forward with. We're planting actively right now.
Chris, we can't hear it. The audience can't hear a word.
We're actively planting right now. We will be over the next month in the lakes that were hardened and lake banks that were redone, Cypress Cay and Bristol, but I really don't have any idea on any plans for Magnolia.
I want to say that you were on my ponds committee and worked very hard and put in a lot of effort and a lot of time in doing that original one. And what you said was 100% correct. Are we going to follow the DO or are we going to follow the DO? Elle sent out, and I hope she's copied all the other board members with that listing of all of our ponds, all of our DOs, and in fact, I believe it's attached. And there are buku ponds in Gateway that have requirements for littorals, and this board hasn't done a thing since we did that in 2015. Nothing. It's always excuses. We want to talk about something serious. Let's talk about aeration. Go to aeration. You go to any professional, any scientist, any biologist, they're gonna tell you that aeration is far more important than those littorals are. But they're both in the development order, as far as I'm concerned, they both need to be done. And I've got it on my deal for talking in the budget. We're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of about $2.5 million to put in the combination of littorals and aeration systems in this community. Not counting what's going to happen to your operation and maintenance bill. Talk to Aquagenics today. We could be looking $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, depending upon the extent to which littorals are put in and maintained. I hope somebody is ready to spend all this money on all this stuff. But if we're gonna follow the development order, I'll be damned if we're gonna pick and choose pieces of it. We're gonna follow the development order. And I agree with what you said.
To answer your question, I don't think the county's gonna care if more aerators are in your lake than what's in the development order. So if you are required to have 2 and you have 5 or 7, I don't think anybody's gonna complain about that. I
As long
don't
as you
think
meet the
any,
minimum.
yeah.
That'd be a
that's
place
the
where they'd be
minimum.
more worried about the minimum.
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to say.
You've
is
proven a point.
When we're getting the guideline, if we're gonna literally write that, it shall be mimic that, you really can't because you wouldn't do that. And then the other question is actually in regards to the current guideline, because I did put them side by side, and it does say about the monthly inspections, and it does talk about, you know, the water testing. It was surprising to me to know that when I did ask Al for results for the water testing on my pond, and to know the treatment wasn't even getting done to the extent of what was agreed upon. So then, is that our vendor issue? That is it Aquagenics that is not following the guidelines that were set here and that is under their contract? I mean, what is the inspection form looks like? Is just an okay, like, how detailed is it? Because if we're creating a guideline just to create it and not follow up, then it's fine, do it. But if you're gonna hold them accountable, we have to be able to measure those things. And it was surprising to me to see that, you know, we all know the water quality in Magnolia Lakes is the worst in the entire Gateway. And we know why, and then to find out that treatment wasn't getting done, and to find out how important littorals are, they could help with the water quality, they weren't even being planted for how many years?
I thought I misunderstood that. I thought we had a treatment program for Magnolia Lakes.
We did.
Has it been stopped?
We stopped, we were trying the biological chemicals, and we've been using them for, I think, over a year.
So we've been going another alternative. We haven't stopped treatment, we just went to a different type of treatment.
We stopped the biological
Oh,
treatment
we
because we
started
didn't
doing-
see any significant, and it's quite costly in that lake.
What are we doing now?
We're just back to aquagenics and standard treatment.
Copper, is that what I'm saying?
Captain XTR,
Which we have tried that before,
and it started working.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that those things will take a long time to work, but I also think if there's a combination of things that we have to do, then that's what we have to do.
And just real quick, to the aquagenics question, are they maintaining per the contract terms as far as water testing and?
Yes. They are required to test the water on an annual basis, which, yes, they are doing that.
And send it out, right?
Pardon me?
And send it out independent. They test
Yes.
more often internally.
Yeah,
Yes.
But they also do the
Our
outside.
contract just stipulates they test the water once a year?
For aquagenics, yes.
So's ours, ours says the same thing. Once a year, you send it out for certification by a third
Yeah,
party.
it's very expensive to do that.
And then we do internal testing?
Not anymore.
Not anymore, yeah, so that's what was confusing to me, because it does say monthly testing. And that's what I said, well, you know what, since I was out for 3 months, go ahead and send me those testings, and then they were no.
Lee County Pond Watch will do it for nothing if you take them the samples. Pelican takes samples every month.
That's correct, however, I cannot take the samples to the
Well,
county
I-
pond.
I-
No,
I'd say
you
who?
can as a private citizen, as a
Right.
private resident.
But as an entity,
However,
you can't?
I can't. A private citizen from this
But Flo,
community can.
But I'm the one that was taking it, so it
Well,
it
I know,
wasn't-
but
yeah.
you weren't available on a
Yeah.
monthly basis. It has to be done on a monthly basis, the second Monday of every month. I did not have anybody to do that. And
So we
Ernesto
can't find
take it
volunteers to
from
collect
me.
water samples once?
My
a
only
year?
comment is it's free if people will do it for you.
I mean,
That's
honestly.
correct.
Thank
I
you,
work
Claudia,
it.
you did bring up a
I-
good point.
On the aeration question, if I can just opine, Aeration isn't number of diffusers, the way we did it in Pelican. We were looking for a minimum turnover rate, and whatever number of diffusers met that minimum requirement, that's how many we put in,
Yeah, that's.
rather than a specific number.
That's basically
And
what
one
the
more
development
point,
order is
just so
based
that
on.
the board is aware, Flavia and I did sit down Wednesday. We worked up a complete littoral planting plan, plus the 77 trees that, or 78
Something to that, between 77 and.
trees that are also needed to be replanted on that pond.
Thank you.
So we do have that plan. The reason they are not planted already is we were going in to repair washouts. Her pond really doesn't have a significant, there's a little bit of an erosion on the south side of the pond. Mainly it was washouts. We wanted to get the washouts repaired and then immediately follow with planting.
Margaret, what I suggest we do is, until the next time we discuss this, is we need to get, our current vendor has no requirements in his contract, this Aquagenics, no requirement in his contract, other some loosely written discussion of littoral. Nothing to indicate his need to comply with the development order. Good example is, and I'm just looking at 10.4.18, and this is why I have a real hard time as an engineer buying 10.4.18 to even begin with. It talks about a minimum littoral shelf of 20 feet. Now let's do the math, people. The littoral shelf is defined as the distance between a control elevation and 2-foot depth. That's the definition. If you're on a 4-to-1 slope, that is 8 feet. If you're on a 6-to-1 slope, that's 12 feet. The county on their own has taken into consideration, as a result of the Hampton part, that the littoral zone goes up the bank 1 foot above. As we all know, there isn't any place in Gateway where you have a littoral or anything that looks like a littoral, other than you want to call St. Augustine grass littoral. It goes right down to the control elevation. But the issue is, all of this, I'm looking at this picture right in front of me, that is no more maintained in accordance with 10.4.18 and the man in the moon. The control elevation down to that 2-foot depth is where you want the littorals. That's where you have the erosion. That's where you protect and have that slimy crap that you see in this from coming up to the bank. That stuff that's sitting out there, I'm gonna guess 15, 20, 25 feet, is useless. It's useless, and it's not required. In fact, it goes beyond the requirements that it's not supposed to be beyond the 2-foot depth. We need to get Aquagenics a copy of the development orders of each of our ponds that have littoral requirements and simply ask them for the cost, which we should be doing anyway, of maintaining these ponds going forward in accordance with the development order, period. Now, I'm not saying get into the issue, we could put this as an addendum or a supplemental. Let's find out what it costs to maintain. Then they'll come back and say, okay, how do you want to address those that are out there 30 feet in the water? They shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be there, but we need that pricing before we go any further. I'm certainly not going to vote for any standards changes or anything else till I see what it's going to cost this community.
And thinning back the littorals like the spike rush that was grown way out into the lake, I don't think anybody would say, no, we shouldn't do that. I'm in agreement,
But he doesn't have it in his contract, as I recall, to do that. It's an extra.
I mean, there's a
We
couple
have,
things.
we have the same contract language, because it came from the district with Aquagenics, and they do in fact trim them at no cost to us. That's part of our monthly inspections. When they go too far, or if the lake is, or the pond is receding, and then the spike rush starts to grow, as it refills, we don't allow that extra growth. They're trimmed. And that is in,
So you're doing that today?
we do that today without cost. What we don't do,
Bob, are you under the same contract we have?
it's boilerplate language, we use district language.
So with the language on
I haven't
littoral maintenance
compared them,
is the
but they should be
same?
exactly the same.
But it's two separate contracts.
But they're separate, but
Yes.
it's the same one, we just changed Pelican Preserve Gateway. Now, the littorals is not in part of our maintenance contract at all. We handle that totally separate, we use different vendors for littoral plating. We could use Aquagenics, but they're very expensive. We choose to use somebody else. But it's not part of a contract.
I mean, my position on a policy, a standard, if you can't establish it, if you can't maintain it, you can't control it and fund it, then there's no point of having it in the first place, right? So we have to look at whatever the standard is and come to an agreement that either we're going to do it or we're not. And in some cases, it's going to cost money to do it. And pretty much that's been our thing for the last 3+ years, is once we decide to do something the right way, it comes with a dollar sign, which is not necessarily popular from a resident's perspective because it could impact assessments. But I mean, I think we collectively have said we're going to try to start doing things right. So I think we need to look at this as well. When it comes to littorals, for me, this is a tricky, even a slippery slope, because I think we can all agree, looking at the DO, if the DO calls it out, then we need to adhere to it. And from a minimum perspective, I think we can all agree to that in most cases there is either DO has the language, or there's a minimum requirement, either from Lee County or from wherever. The issue that you run into is when you go above the minimum, what is excessive? What do you maintain it to? If the minimum is 25-30%, what is excessive? And I do remember sitting here, and I think I specifically asked, I can't remember her name that was here from the,
Right,
Jessica.
I think it was Jessica, and I said, because I think someone had asked is there a maximum? And she said, no, there's no maximum. And I specifically asked her, based on your experience, is there an amount where there's a diminishing return? And she did say yes, but she would not say how much, whether if it's 70% coverage, 100% coverage. And I asked her for a very specific reason, because if you want to maintain the littorals, either you let it grow naturally and it is what it is, because what's excessive? How do you define excessive? Is that 45%? Is it 50%? And I could ask one person over here who lives on a lake, and they would say, well, anything over 35 is excessive because then it encroaches into the lake, or it becomes, whatever. But I could ask someone over here, and they might have a different response to that. Some people don't want any littorals around their backyard, as long as it meets the standards. And if you look at the DO, it calls out specific places. So the problem that I have, and I think the challenge has always been, if we all agree to the minimum, if we're going to define a maintenance criteria, what is that maintenance? How do you define what that percentage is? How far is it circumference, or is it the actual outreach from the shoreline to whatever? And I think 4 feet is the
zero is control elevation.
We started control
About
elevation
2 feet.
and won't allow them 8 to 10 feet out.
8 to 10 feet out. So, I mean, I think that's what we need to look at first. Can we control the outward growth? If that's 8 to 12 feet, great. Okay, then we at least
Depends on the
then we
season.
can maintain it that way.
It depends on the
But
season.
that solves one problem. The second problem is if you've got 25 or 25-30% minimum, and it's designated in the DO where that littoral start. If by natural growth occurs and it covers the circumference, where do you cut? Every couple of years, do you revert back to the original DO? Or, I mean, that's the challenge that I have, is there's too much gray there to define it, because I don't think you're going to make anybody happy. But I don't have an answer. I'm just,
When you start planting littorals, you plant them pretty far apart, and in 2 years they're solid.
yeah.
You don't have to go in and really spend a lot of money. We have learned.
So you cut if it exceeds the 8 to 12 feet.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
it goes out beyond that, we cut.
But anything that grows within the circumference, you don't
We're
touch.
okay with, and the only requirement is height.
Height.
They can only go to
So
a certain height.
You can surpass your.
And we had that in the.
Yeah, we won't accept
You can
anything
surpass
over.
your 30%,
But
but you
when
don't
you're
let it go
putting
out
it-
past a certain point or up past a certain point. Is that?
Well, it's kind of both. The out is for anything, but the up is, we just don't plant anything that goes over 3.5 feet tall.
Or maintain it to 3 feet tall.
Well, we don't plant it, but yeah, we haven't had that problem yet. But my point with the littorals is, spike rush is one thing, that's cheap. But once you start putting antenna and arrowhead and pickerel and all that, that's pretty expensive stuff. But it doesn't take a lot. You just put a few, and in 2 or 3 years, you'll have more than you can deal with. That was and really keeps the cost down on the installation. You gotta be a little patient.
Thank you, Bob. I'm Mrs. Blair. You have the floor.
Thank you. All right. Okay. We're talking about littorals, and we live in Florida, and littorals are important for the stormwater ponds. However, there are different kinds of littorals that look really pretty, and I've seen them. They're the, lily pads, right?
And you like the lily?
I love the lily pads. They are pretty, they float, they have flowers, and you would never consider them littorals, but they are littorals and they do serve the same purpose. So maybe we need to look at not just littorals, but the kind of littorals that are on these ponds. Because there are some other kinds that make flowers too, that are really pretty, and Al has shown them to me, and they look nice. And in Florida, you need the littorals are there for a purpose. They do, you know, clean the water, they do prevent erosion, and there are purposes. Up north, you would never think of putting those on a pond or anything, because it's just not aesthetically pleasing. But here, there's a purpose for them. So that's what I'm looking at. But if we don't like what we have, why can't we change them to something more pleasant? I mean, that's it. Also, going through the thing, not to be rude or
Go ahead.
anything, I made some grammatical changes.
That's fine.
I found grammatical errors.
Can I respond to one of the things Kathy said, because she's on point? I'm looking at the development order for Hampton Park, and I would say that relative to the land development plan and the landscape plan, it's one of the best written, and the county will say that. Trouble was, I just didn't build it that way. But it calls for, in Zone B, which is from the control elevation out 1 foot, which is a 4-foot wide strip. It calls for 5 species that are to be interchanged. The problem you've got with these 5 species, and Ellen and I talked about this till we're blue in the face, and I talked to Lee County about it, is we have 3-foot water swings here. Yeah. So unless we want to put in an irrigation system around these ponds to keep them from dying in the dry season, and we're whistling Dixie planting these things. There are very few plants that you put in Bicopa, which is, to me, not really a plant, it's more like grass. You can put in Bicopa to go from that